What is up, everyone? So today we will be watching 32 Mr. Nightmare, and it's a space and studio special. Mr. Nightmare. It's one of my favorite
I was
horror
22
stories.
years old, attending a Halloween party at my former best friend Nick's house, who died of a heroin overdose in 2013. Before his death, he would throw big Halloween parties every year at his house, as his parents routinely flew to New York every year to attend their own friend's party. He was always a big Halloween freak, so the whole house was littered with truly horrifying props that we all knew Nick spent way too much money on. He even put up giant walls of cardboard and covered them with wallpapers to create a haunted maze of sorts. I want to keep this story PG-13 rated, so I'll skip the weed, beer, LSD, and sex and get right to the part where things got bad.
Owie,
I'll
making
admit,
sure I
we
blur
weren't in
that
our
out
right
with the
minds.
beeping
None of
noise.
us were. Anyone
So
who came
don't
to
you
Nick's
worry.
parties knew what went down. Me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were upstairs in Nick's room
This is a
smoking a
space
bong
special.
when
It
we
will
heard
be
two
on the
steady,
premiere.
loud bangs come from downstairs. Nick clumsily but panickingly rushed to open the door and see what was going on. There were sounds of screaming of both guys and girls. I remember quite clearly it sounded as if there were a crowd of people screaming for their lives down there. We all called Nick to come back in and shut the door. Even under the influence of drugs, we all knew what was going on. Nick ran back inside and shut the door quickly
Drugs.
but also quietly,
We
locking
could get
it
arrested
behind
for
him.
that, buddy.
He turned to us and had on the facial expression of someone who had just witnessed murder. "What did you see? What's going on?" we all shouted at him. He
Someone
told us
just
to
got
hide
murdered.
before anything else. We all knew why. From that point on, we didn't ask questions. Nick hid the lights and hid in the closet with Joey, while I hid under the bed with Q, and Vinny G hid in the storage box. We could hear the blasting music from downstairs turn off, followed by a grown man screaming at everyone to shut up. One unfortunate girl let out a scream of shock and fear, and after another bang, silence. The man started shouting at everyone again, but personally I couldn't hear it too well, and I certainly as hell wouldn't remember exactly what he was shouting. We heard two other men shouting. By now there were a confirmed 3 intruders in the house, but there could have been more for all we knew at that point. We heard the sound of boots stomping up the stairs and then coming halfway down the hall and stopping outside the bedroom door. The intruder on the other side of the door tried the doorknob, but when he realized it was locked, he started ramming into the door with most likely his shoulder. After a few failed attempts at that, the sound of a few shots to the doorknob were clearly enough to break the lock, allowing the door to swing open. We heard cries from downstairs after the shots to the doorknob, followed by silence and gunshot. Me and Nick had our hands on our mouths to shield our breathing noises. I watched through the transparent cloth that hung from the bottom of Nick's bed as the black boots with overlapping ripping denim jeans moved instinctively to the closet. He opened the door. I could hear Nick begging for the intruder not to kill him, offering a generous amount of money if they would leave. Nick gave himself up as the house owner. That's when the intruder ordered him downstairs. The rest of us stayed put. Apparently Joey hadn't been caught with Nick. We stayed under the bed, shaking and afraid.
Guys,
There
this
was
is
near silence from
putting
downstairs,
goosebumps in my skin if you
other
guys
than
know
Nick talking
what
with the
that
intruders,
means.
but whatever they were saying was much too low for us to hear. It felt like a near 20 minutes before the front door slammed shut and Nick came running back upstairs to tell us that they were gone. I think the most horrifying moment of my life was when I stepped downstairs back into the living room and saw the 2 dead bodies laying lifelessly on the ground, holes in their heads spewing out blood. Jen and Robbie, 2 good friends that I still miss. I'll spare you the details of what happened when the police arrived, but despite the fact that the house smelled like a marijuana greenhouse, the police were more interested in finding out who the masked men were that killed 2 innocent college students. Oh yeah, Nicky told the 4 of us who were hiding in his room that there were 4 intruders in total, all wearing fedoras, vendetta masks, coats, and gloves. They demanded $100,000 in cash, and when Nick could not provide it, they demanded he fill their empty sack with his most valued possessions. All of the partygoers held hostage in the room were also forced to throw their wallets into the sack or they would be shot. After the incident, Nick became depressed. He started drinking too much, becoming an alcoholic. He stopped showing up to school, Ultimately, he ended up dropping out. He started the use of heavier drugs, such as meth and heroin. I had one good talk with him since the incident, and he was more real during this talk than he had ever been. He told me, with tears rolling down his cheeks and a pipe in his hand, he lived in constant pain, knowing he caused the death of two of his best friends.
This is sad,
Nick died of a
everyone.
heroin overdose in July of 2013, not even a year after the incident. It was my first Halloween living in my own house away from my parents. I live in a small corner house with a basement but no upstairs, a house my parents paid half for. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was sitting in the living room watching scary Halloween movies when I found myself getting up to answer a knock at the door. But then I stopped and thought, who could be at the door at 11 p.m.? Surely there were no more trick-or-treaters out. I had a pretty good feeling it was a late-night Halloween ding-dong ditcher, so I gave it a second. Then I shot a glance to the porch through the window. They were gone already.
Guys, I'm so scared.
Yup, ding-dong ditchers. I sat back down, not thinking twice about it, and again, knocking at the front door. Get lost, I yelled. I was not in the mood for punky kids. They ignored my demands and started pounding now, not just knocking. I was pissed now. I leaped up and swung the door open.
Yeah, so would I
No one
be.
was there once again. I slipped on my shoes and headed outside to begin searching the bushes for the kids, but there was nobody in sight. Not in the bushes, not behind my car, not across the street. I was done answering. I didn't want to feed into their fun anymore, so I went back inside, double-locked the door, and went to my bedroom, also locking that door, just to feel safer, I guess. Even over the TV, I could still hear the stupid kids pounding on my front door repeatedly. I was so close to calling the cops to get them away, but that would undoubtedly lead to my house being egged or teepeed. The pounding continued for an uncomfortably long time, more than half an hour. I thought these kids must be filming something for YouTube and were desperate for a reaction, but I wasn't going to give it to them. At some point I dozed off with the TV on, only to wake up to the knocking again. I looked at the clock. It was 2 in the fucking morning. How could those kids still be at it, I thought. I turned the TV off and sat up with my ears open. For a few moments, my heart completely stopped as I realized the knocking was not at my front door, but rather at my bedroom door. I jumped out of bed, looking around my room like a madman for something to use as a weapon. They knew I was awake now. They were trying the doorknob, trying to bust down the door. These weren't any kids. By some miracle, I came up with an idea. It was a long shot, but it was all I could think of. I turned on the receiver to my speaker system, plugged in my iPhone, brought up the YouTube app, typed in 45 gunshot sound effect, turned on the volume, and pressed play. The sound of a gunshot echoed out of the speakers. It sounded real enough. I paused the video after the first shot and yelled, "That was a warning shot. Leave now or I won't hesitate to shoot you in the head." And it worked. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps stomping over my wood floors and out the front door. I gave it a moment before opening my bedroom door and peeking outside. They were gone, but the front door was left wide open. I quickly shut it, called the police, and that's where my story ended.
That's creepy as hell, guys.
So I was never really a big Halloween person, mostly because I grew up without many friends, and once I passed the age of 10, I couldn't use the excuse of going with my mom anymore. And it's not like I had friends to go with. So this last Halloween, I was 14 years old. I do have a little sister who's only 8, so my mom went trick-or-treating with her. My one really good friend, Steve, already had plans and I didn't want to impose, so it didn't seem like I'd be trick-or-treating this year. I felt a tiny part of me explode with happiness on the inside when my mom asked me to stay home and hand out candies. Now I felt like I had a job to do that didn't involve me trick-or-treating alone like a loser. My mom left with my sister at about 6 o'clock, about an hour after she got home from work. She told me to expect her back around 9, so I was relaxing on the couch in the living room, watching the scary movie marathon on AMC, and occasionally answering the door to give candy to the kiddies. And while doing that, The kitchen phone began to ring. I remember the ringer was set so loud it actually made me jump. I picked up the phone, and the other end remained silent, except for a bit of fumbling and background noise. Sounds you'd expect when somebody's holding a phone. I think I said hello about 5 times before the person on the other end hung up. I just knew it was somebody pulling a Halloween prank call on me. What else could I do but ignore it? That worked well
Buddy,
enough
shut
for the next
up.
few minutes of watching TV, answering the phone until
If
the
I
phone
was you,
rang
I
again.
would actually.
Same unknown
Alright, everyone, I'm back. Sorry about that.
number coming up on the caller ID. I wanted to see where this was going, so I picked it up once more. This time I could hear a very faint breathing on the other end. "All right, Steve, I know it's you," I said into the phone.
Something very, very scary
Yeah,
gonna happen. Just know.
By this point, I didn't want to say I was scared, but I was for sure a bit uneasy. It was
So
a
you were
long
nervous.
time before that phone rang again. It was getting later, darker, and the doorbell seemed to be ringing less and less. I was watching the original Friday the 13th when it happened again. The sound of that phone ringing had become sickening, as I knew who it would be, or rather, I didn't. For some reason, I gave in again and picked up. And once again, silence. Other than the faint breathing and fumbling of the phone. It was like this for almost half a minute before they finally spoke in an exaggerated deep voice. "I'll be paying you a visit tonight." I had enough of this joke. I told them to fuck off and hang up the phone, promising to myself not to pick it up again. I'd say about half an hour later, out of the blue, all the power in the house was cut.
Shut up. Thanks, you just ruined this entire live stream.
I'd promising to myself not to pick it up again. I'd say about half an hour later, out of the blue, all the power in the house was cut. The lights went out. The TV turned off. Complete darkness. I stood up, now frozen in fear, when loud and angry thumping came from the front door. I completely lost it and began screaming like a girl, but there was something coming from outside. Laughter. I recognized that laughter. I opened the door, and there he was. Stephen. I shoved him nearly down the steps out of anger. "So, that was you who made those dumb phone calls?" I asked. He nodded while laughing. "I didn't sound like you on the phone. Let me hear you do that voice again," I said. "What?" He seemed confused. "I didn't say anything, you idiot. I just called and did that heavy breathing." I thought he was lying at first. But then my heart dropped. I had him follow me to the fuse box outside. Just as I feared, it had been opened and all the wires had been snipped. I think we ran faster than any Olympic champions back into the house. I called my mom, who told us to stay inside and wait for the police, who she then called. The call was traced to a payphone outside of a nearby bar. I still wonder, was this just a dumb Halloween prank gone too far? Or was it a potential break-in? And God knows what else waiting to happen. I don't think I ever want to find out.
That's good for you.
When I was younger, my friends and I went trick-or-treating every year. This one particular year, as we were trick-or-treating, we passed a man who stood still with a mask on, holding a lantern.
Nasty.
As we walked past him, he turned his whole body around and followed us with his eyes. We were creeped out, but there were plenty of people around, so we made our way to the next house. My friends and I saw him over and over again as we made our way from house to house. He seemed to be following us in typical horror story form. We walked so slow, we couldn't figure out how he kept up with us. At one house, when we hadn't seen him for a while, we got our candy. As we turned around to walk back to the street, the masked man stood in the road waiting for us. Immediately, we knocked back on the door and told the owners of the house about it. The masked man continued walking down the street, and we didn't see him again that night. Later on, an adult friend of the family told us he saw a masked man hiding behind a tree, waving little kids over, and he only backed off when he threatened to call the police.
I was trick-or-treating with my friend Casey. We were both 11 years old at the time. We were walking across a small wooden bridge over a small river that many call Jackwinkle River, when a black Jeep pulled up on the other side of the bridge, basically blocking our way. We turned around and hurried away. We were the types of kids to obey the stranger danger rules. We could hear the windows of the Jeep rolling down, and a man with a raspy smoker's voice called for us to come back. He was yelling for help, asking us for directions. I yelled sorry, and we continued to hurry away. The Jeep couldn't fit over that small bridge, so it pulled away and drove down the road on the other side. We thought we had made our escape from the creepy driver, when here came an SUV barreling around the corner and down the street, slamming on the brakes in front of us. Once again, the driver rolled down the windows. Now with them right next to us, we could see there were 2 passengers in the car as well. An old guy with gray curly hair and a mustache in the backseat, who also had a raspy smoker's voice, told us to get in the car, that they have free bags of candy. The Jeep banged a 3-point turn and tailed us wherever we went. At one point, the Jeep finally accelerated past us, came to a stop, and the back and front passenger side doors opened, and the 2 creepy men stepped out lunging at us. We dropped our bags of candy and ran straight for my house, which was in sight now. We rang the doorbell desperately at least 20 times. The old men that were chasing us couldn't run fast, and when they saw us running to my house, they turned back. My mom opened the door, and we screamed and pointed at the Jeep that was backing away in the other direction. She shoved us inside and locked the door and called the police like any mom would. She reported the black Jeep with 3 men inside, older looking, raspy voices, and any other descriptions we gave. My mom was freaking out all night, worried about the fact that they knew where we lived now. My dad tried to calm her, but she couldn't calm down. Ultimately, the police
Poor
agreed to send an
lady.
unmarked police car to stay out front and keep guard for 3 hours. That made my mom feel a little better, but what made us all feel better was when my dad woke us up to see the flashing red and blue lights outside of the unmarked police car. They had pulled over an SUV, a black Jeep, and 3 men were in cuffs. The 3 old creeps that tried to kidnap me and Casey. My dad went outside to talk to the officer and most likely confirmed that those were the men. Me and Casey went to the doorway and screamed at the men for their attention. They looked, and we both gave them the finger. My mom then pulled us back in and shut the door, sending us to bed. We went from the worst night of both of our lives to ultimately the best night of our lives.
What?
This story took
If a
place
man
on
gets
Halloween
arrested,
night. I took my
what the
7-year-old daughter Jamie trick-or-treating for a few hours, and when we got back, I cooked dinner, we watched TV together, and then I sent her to bed. I was feeling especially tired that night, so I brushed up and went to sleep. Shortly after, my daughter entered the room and told me there was someone in her closet. I assured her there was no one in her closet. She asked to sleep with me, but I once again assured her that she was safe in her room. She reluctantly went back to her room and shut the door. I made a mental note that if she came back again, I would walk her to her closet and show her that there's no one in there.
this stuff has very good
Surely enough,
speakers.
5 minutes
It
later she
picks up
came back.
anything.
I asked her why she thought there was someone in her closet. She responded saying she heard someone moving around and things falling over. Honestly, when she said that, it kind of made my heart jump for a second.
Hang on, everyone. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Alright, everyone. 30 seconds are over.
I walked her to her room and turned on the lights. I jokingly asked, "Is anybody in there?" We stood and listened. I didn't expect to hear anything. There it was, a thud from inside the closet. I screamed at Jamie to run to the neighbors and call the police. As she did, I swung the door open and was shocked to find the neighbor's son, Randy, sitting on top of my daughter's Lego box. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and yanked him up aggressively. I walked him angrily back to his parents' house next door and found Jamie ringing the doorbell. When they answered, I shoved him inside right into his father and explained everything. I told him I wouldn't press charges, but if I ever caught him near my daughter again, they would all be sorry. Randy's dad, Mark, slapped him across the face, then asked me to come inside to allow Randy to explain himself. Me and Jamie both went inside. Apparently, while I was taking Jamie trick-or-treating, he had snuck into our house through an open window and hid in our closet with his friend Daryl. I asked him if this Daryl kid was still in my house. He said yes. I told Jamie to wait with Mark while I ran back into my house, and right as I entered, there he was. This Daryl kid, uglier and shadier looking than Randy. He had my daughter's underwear in his hand. What I did next was completely out of fatherly protective anger. I grabbed the little shit by the throat and threw him to the floor, slapping him 4 times in the face, then hesitantly allowing him to get up and leave. The only reason I didn't call the police was because of my close friendship with Mark. But I made my point very strongly that if they ever so even waved to my daughter again, they would be in the news the next day. We went back to sleep. I let Jamie sleep with me after that incident. She was horrified. The next morning, I found a small drill hole in her closet door. The sick little bastards were spying on my daughter while she slept, at the same time playing with her underwear.
Alright,
Maybe
everyone.
you don't understand the horror of this story unless you're a parent, but there are many days where I think I made a mistake not calling the police.
Sorry about him, he's
I
kind of
still
mental.
can, but nothing has happened since,
Hang
and I
on.
figure I shouldn't create more trouble now. Jamie's 13 now, and that creep Randy has since gone away to college.
Remember when we went with our shower? It got wet. Now it keeps raining.
Hey, you need to flip it
We had
over.
just moved into our large new house in Mississauga, Ontario, in an area called Winston Churchill. It was Halloween night, and my parents, my 4 other sisters, my brother, and I were unpacking our stuff in our new bedrooms. We had just finished and were talking to each other about leaving
my
our
butt
old
to toe,
schools and
everyone.
friends behind. My mother called us to do chores. I was really tired since it was 11:30 at night, way past the trick-or-treating buzz, and we had to do chores now? It seemed to take forever, but when I was done, I decided to go to my bedroom and get some sleep. I heard what sounded like footsteps in the upstairs hallway. Thinking it was my brother or sister, I got up to shout at them for bothering me while I was sleeping, but there, as far as I could tell, there was no one there. I rushed down to the basement where my parents, sister, and brother were considerately working. I asked them all if they had been upstairs, and they replied no. Now I was getting pretty freaked out, but I had to believe it was just my imagination and shrugged it off as if it had never happened. I went back to my bed, which was now freezing cold. I had to put on a sweater. It was just too cold. I woke up in the middle of the night around 12:30 a.m. after everyone had gone to sleep. I heard this loud banging sound that seemed to be coming from my parents' bedroom. I thought it might be my brother or sister waiting to get a drink of water, but was too scared to go alone. I was wrong. The banging continued, getting louder by the minute. I couldn't get to sleep, so I decided to check it out. I walked into the hallway, and believe me, there was no one there. As I walked in, the banging seemed to stop. I stared at the door, only for a quick moment before deciding to go back to bed. After a couple of minutes, the banging started again. Now I was totally chilled to my very last bone. I tried to sleep again, but I couldn't. Very typical of me. The door to my bedroom creaked open, as if someone were pushing it lightly. But it was too dark to see who or what could have caused it. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Who is it? Let me go back to sleep. Very light footsteps began to move closer to my bed. I thought it was one of my sisters, until I turned onto my side after the footsteps stopped. I saw a figure standing next to my bed. A figure at least 7 feet tall. I choked the urge to scream. Nothing came out. I lay there in unimaginable horror as the figure finally said, "Boo." That was when I screamed at the top of my lungs and covered my eyes, when my parents thrust open the door to my room and flicked on the light.
Scary!
There was no figure there.
In my studio right now, hang on.
There was no figure by my bed. I cried out everything to them, the thumping, the figures.
Sorry about
My
that,
siblings
everyone.
came into the doorway and watched me freak out. I asked my parents if they heard the knocking on their door. Surely they must have. It was their door after all. But they said
No.
there was no knocking. Not that they knew of. They all
Shit.
looked at me like I was crazy. But I know I'm not. You can't just imagine something like that. Something so real.
That's creepy. How much more?
I'll never forget this night.
Alright, I'll get the next
I
stream
know I
up.
won't. It was a few years ago, Halloween night.
What's
We were all
this?
20 years old. Right at that age.
Silence.
What the hell?
The man started shouting.
Their hand on my shoulder, and I took off, running and screaming while at the same time laughing. There's something so disturbing about being in
What's
that
this?
huge basement, knowing someone was in there with us. One of my friends thankfully
Oh.
found a key on a desk in the corner of the room.
Thing.
We all ran back upstairs, back to the light, and found the exit. The actual experience and process of getting through that maze of a haunted house was much longer than my story makes it out to be, but that's not where things got horrifying. Right outside the exit door was a small bin with a sign that said, "Drop keys here, please." That's how the staff would collect the keys and bring them back down into the basement.
Damn, guys, that's so creepy.
Halfway off the premises of the haunted house, the exit door opened, and a really tall person dressed in a black robe and bloody pig mask stepped out and started following in our direction. He or she, though it was most likely a he,
Barf.
so I'll
Yuck.
refer to them as a he, appeared to be one of the staff members for the attraction. As we walked further away from the attraction, so did the guy in the costume.
Nasty.
It seemed to all of us that he was following us by this point. One of my friends called. "We don't have the key if that's what you want. We dropped it in the little bin."
Damn.
But that didn't do the trick. As a joke, we started running just to see if he would too, and he did. We stopped, and so did he. We stood still,
Oh, damn.
and so did he.
They're fucked up.
At first it was funny, maybe it was just a joke. But as we got closer to my friend Eddie's house, we were starting to discuss if we should reveal where he lives to this guy. He had been following us for at least 5 blocks now, so if it was a joke, it had gone far enough. Eddie's parents were both home, so we felt safe to go inside. Apparently, Eddie's door was broken, whatever that meant, so we had to go run back. We
Alright, we'll
quickly
watch
waved
this
at the
one.
douchebag still following us, then walked to Eddie's backyard, shutting the gate behind us. Wiping our feet on his welcome mat on the back door, we heard the gate open. The man emerged from behind the side of the house and began walking towards us once again. This time, much faster. Eddie opened the back door and called to his dad, telling him to get his gun. This seemed to grab the masked man's attention. He slowed down, turned his head to face Eddie. Eddie's dad emerged, angry as hell, and aimed his pistol at the masked coward. He raised his hands up and cried out for him not to shoot, that he's only 27. Eddie's dad told him to get lost and never come back. And the next time, he wouldn't think twice about pulling the trigger.
Oh, damn.
Personally,
Talk about getting triggered.
I wish Eddie's dad had made the guy get on his knees and take off the mask, then call the police. That guy got off too easily. For all we know, he could have been armed as well. We contacted the haunted house attraction, and they informed us that they had no such employee dressed in a pig mask.
I'm just sitting over here, and my arms just got shaked. Alright, we're going to watch Thanksgiving now.
Number 4. Me and the girlfriend were on our way to her parents' house. I was invited to Thanksgiving dinner with them, which was a huge honor for me since I'd only met her parents 3 times. I was also nervous since her grandparents and aunts and uncles would also be there who I had never met. We had a long trek from my house to her parents' house. It would be a good hour-long drive. About 45 minutes into the drive, we had to stop for gas. We pulled up into a literally dead Gulf station right off the highway, and I decided to fill up with premium for once to do my car a favor. Of course, it was cheaper to pay with cash, so I went inside with my head down as I dug my hand inside my wallet searching for a 10 and a 20, and when I pulled the bills out, I instinctively looked up and said, 30 on 2 please. But I stopped mid-sentence. There was no one there. I looked for a bell on the counter. None. I simply called out, anyone there? There wasn't even a back door behind the counter that you would assume would lead to some kind of employees-only room. No, it was just completely empty. The only other door in this little gas station besides the entrance was the single bathroom, and that door was open, exposing the blackness from within the bathroom. I figured maybe whoever was manning the cash register may have just gone outside for something. I walked back outside and shrugged my shoulders at my girlfriend out of confusion. I looked around for maybe a porta potty or an ice machine or something that could be distracting a potential cashier. But there was nothing. It was a relatively small little station with foliage surrounding it in almost all directions. I figured maybe somebody could be behind the building smoking a bogey or a doobie, so I went back there as a final attempt. Nope, just a dumpster sitting under a dimly lit roof light. Ugh, I figured I'd just pay credit at this point and turn it back. But as I did, somebody from out in the woods called over to me in a kind of whispery yell. My heart skipped a beat when I heard this. Hey! Hey! I kept hearing it from the woods. I took out my phone and flipped on the flashlight just to skim the outer tree line for anybody who could be hiding in there. As my now shaking hand rotated the phone slowly, the light momentarily revealed somebody from behind a tree. I took off back to the car and stepped on it out of there. My girlfriend was scared shitless just in reaction to my fear. I told her about the bizarre thing that just happened, and from that point on, she kept looking through the rearview mirrors just to make sure we weren't being followed. We pulled up to the next gas station we could find, this time one that actually had a cashier. I paid him $30 and began filling up. A van pulled up to the pump right behind mine, and a man wearing a cap stepped out staring intently at me. I tried to act as if I didn't notice him, but when it got to the point where he was staring at me for at least 20 seconds straight, I had to look at him and ask him if there was a problem. He finally turned away. The second I was done, I hopped back in the car and took off once more. We made it to her parents' house safely, and I don't believe we were followed. Now, I wouldn't have shared this story if it weren't for the fact that a few weeks later, I did some research and found out that a 33-year-old Indian man who worked at the gas station we had stopped at had been murdered, and his body was stuffed in the woods behind the station. I immediately gave the police a tip about the guy who I saw at the station who was surely caught on camera. The following year on Thanksgiving, a similar murder happened at another gas station. We have since nicknamed him the Thanksgiving Killer. I fear only the worst once more this year, as he has still not been caught. Number 3. Walmart attracts the weirdest people. It was Black Friday, meaning me and my brothers were going video game shopping. Our first and only stop was Walmart. The place was absolutely mobbed, and being Walmart, it was mobbed with the wrong kinds of people. Gross, weird, and just creepy people everywhere trying to save a few bucks on already cheap products. We rode the escalators upstairs to the video game section. I was looking for the latest Call of Duty game personally, but my brothers were looking for some other game I don't remember. Then, out of nowhere, some creepy, heavy, oldish man who smelled like vomit walked up to me and said, "You like video games, huh?"
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
GTA 5.
I began to slowly slide away just to show that I wasn't interested in conversation. "My son likes video games too. Maybe you should come over and play some with him.
So saying we're gonna
He
get back
really
inside the
craves
gaming
company."
soon?
The man gave me a
But since we
creepy
haven't
smile.
uploaded for
No,
like
I'm not from
a
around
long,
town, sorry.
long time,
That's
we'll be
all I could think
uploading
of saying.
more
I didn't even give him a chance to keep this
videos
conversation
instead
going.
of
Hell, I wasn't
gaming.
obligated to stand there and talk to this guy. I simply gave him a
Come on,
smile
guys, I
and
already
called my
did 2
brother's name out
gamings.
while walking away just to seem distracted. I did a quick backwards glance. He was just
I'll be putting them
staring
all
at
inside
me
the
as I
link
walked
below.
away. I made it to the next aisle over and immediately felt comfort in being next to my brothers.
I'll be also putting the
I
Liberty
waited
County.
around until they finally found their game and we headed over to the checkout counters. The lines were insane. I knew it would probably take 10 to 15 minutes just to make it to the counters, so I took that opportunity to check out some of the jeans and t-shirt sales. At one point, I found myself in probably the most secluded corner of the store checking out some t-shirts when someone grabbed my arm hard. I thought it was my brother messing with me, so I turned around and told him to fuck off. But it wasn't him. It was the man. I started calling for help, screaming that I didn't know this man. Some people came over and stared, but that was about it. The man let go and walked away. I don't know what he was thinking or planning on trying in such a public place. I didn't tell my brothers what happened out of embarrassment, but they picked up on the fact that I was quiet afterwards. "It's nothing," I kept telling them. We got into my brother's Camaro, and when I sat down, I looked to the entrance of the Walmart. There he fucking was, sitting at the bench, facing me. As we were leaving the lot, we had to pass right in front of the store. I got one last look at the creepy man. His head moved ever so slightly to constantly face me, even through the car window at night. I gave him the finger, but it didn't seem to influence him in the slightest. That was the last I ever saw of him. Walmart attracts the weirdest people. Number 2. It was
Alright,
Black Friday
2 more left
2013,
before we
and
do
I
my
decided to be one of those people who gets up at 3 a.m. to get some early deals. Home Depot was having crazy deals on artificial Christmas trees, so I wanted to get there early and buy one for my family. They opened their doors at 3 a.m. on the spot, 3 hours earlier than usual for Black Friday. Surprisingly, only me and one other guy were waiting to get in. I guess everyone else was at Best Buy or at the mall. I found a nice 9-foot tall artificial Christmas tree, originally for $200, but at that moment, the checkout, and then to my car. The parking lot was still surprisingly empty for Black Friday. I figured maybe I didn't have to come so early. I tipped the guy and got in my car ready to leave, when someone knocked on my window. I lowered the window, and some guy, mid-20s, beanie, black, and tall, leaned into my window asking if I had change. I opened the little compartment in between seats where I normally keep change. And it was actually empty. I didn't want to have to hand up 10, so I said, "Nah, man, sorry." He looked disappointed, and I actually felt bad. He then asked me if I could give him a lift to the nearest gas station. I was a bit nervous about letting a stranger in my car, but guess what? I let him in. He did not thank me, which kind of hurt, I guess because I'm a little sensitive. I asked him if he knew of any close-by gas stations. He just said, nah. A few seconds later, I asked him why he needed to go to a gas station. I swear to God, he didn't answer. It's not like he didn't hear me. He just flat out ignored me. I stopped looking at him at the point because I was feeling uncomfortable now. I kept driving down main and side roads, but there was no goddamn gas stations anywhere. I was trying not to look in his direction, but I could tell he was staring at me. Every turn I made, every stop sign I stopped at, he was staring at me. I was sweating now. This guy was freaking me out. I felt like at any moment he could just grab my throat and I'd be done for. At last, I could see a gas station just beyond a light, which had just turned red. I did have to turn red just now, I thought to myself. I could still feel his stare, even as I looked the other way. I finally decided to sump the balls and looked at him. I felt his cold, emotionless stare run straight through my eyes and my soul. Are you okay? I asked him. He ever so slightly nodded his head, almost not even noticeable. The light turned green, and I pulled into the gas station. He stepped out and stood by the sidewalk and watched me as I pulled away. When I got past the intersection, I left out of joy and the ridiculousness of the situation. But then I realized something. I patted myself down, then began to panic. I was missing something. My phone. I was only a few blocks away, so I made a U-turn and headed back to the gas station. It was gone already. I drove home and confirmed that my phone was missing. I knew I had left it in the cup holder of the car. My phone had all of my info on it. I contemplated calling the police, but I didn't. I couldn't even sleep that night in fear of some freak stranger having my address. The next night, after getting home from our 2-day delayed Thanksgiving dinner, I found my front door was open and my entire house was trashed. I called the police with my neighbor's phone. They didn't find him in there, but they found his prints everywhere. The only thing, the prints did not match anyone on record. Number one, it was Thanksgiving. I had half the family over, along with the next door neighbors Tom and his wife. They didn't have a big family, so they used to come over to watch the game with us on Thanksgiving. After eating dinner, we all sat in the living room to watch football, except for my daughters Tracy and Michelle, who aren't into football. At the time, Michelle was only 13 years old, and Tracy was 16. During halftime, I decided to go up to Michelle's room to get her to come down. We finally budged and came down to the living room. Me, Tom, and a few in-laws went outside to smoke. Me and Tom talked about his son, Sam. Apparently Sam had gone back home to be alone and watch movies. He had been with us earlier. Tom joked that he was probably just watching porn, though. I laughed. I stared up at one of the windows to my house, the window to Michelle's room. There was someone looking out the window. What the hell is Michelle doing back in her room? I thought. But then I realized that wasn't Michelle. In fact, I didn't know who the hell that was. I excused myself from the group and stormed back inside and upstairs to Michelle's room. Michelle followed after she saw me enter her room. Did someone just come in here? I asked. No, why? I looked around the room. It was completely empty. I nudged Michelle to go back downstairs while I turned off the lamp. We went back to the living room where the game would be starting up momentarily. I finally decided to ask everyone if anyone had been in Michelle's room at her window. Everyone either said no or shook their heads no. Someone had to be lying. I heard a slight thud come from upstairs in Michelle's room. I ran back upstairs, again with Michelle following me. I flicked on the lights in her room and spun around in a circle looking for someone. The sliding closet door was cracked open. I just realized. I thought I could see something through the crack. I squinted my eyes to try and see what it was. It was an eye. I screamed like a child for maybe 2 seconds, followed by Michelle. Relatives ran up into the room as I angrily slid open the closet and pulled out Sam, Tom's son. Tom ran up and found me basically holding Sam by the neck. Sam was holding some belongings on my daughter that I'd rather not talk about. This incident definitely scarred, maybe even ruined my friendship with Tom and his wife, and it's made me that much more protective over my daughter.
Alright. That's two. This one plus this one. That's gonna be executing our dear friend Space Video.
Good or anything. I just played
A
so I could
Space
say I played
Video
the sport and
special.
to put
It will be
something on my college
executing them.
resume. This one particular game, we were playing some nearby
Close
school.
to
I
the
can't
end.
remember the name of it, but we were home. This
Not
wasn't a very important game, so not a lot of people were watching in the bleachers. I think we were down like 22-13 when some
This is
kid
not
on
made
the
for
other team
kids,
started trash
so-
talking me and a few
Yeah!
of my teammates, but mostly me, making fun of my size and my hair.
Yeah.
It got to the point where after every shot I missed, the kid would throw some wise-ass comments my way. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore, and I shoved the kid as hard as I could. He fell on his back, sliding off the court. My teammates held his teammates back from attacking me as the ref blew his whistle and ejected me from the game. I didn't care. It felt way too good to feel bad about it. I walked right past my coach, not even batting an eye, and went straight for the locker room. The door was locked for some reason. I didn't want to have to awkwardly ask my coach to go unlock it, so I went outside and went around to the other side of the boys' locker room, where there was an outside entrance. Strangely, that one was open. That door was never left open. As I stepped into the locker room, I realized it was as cold in there as it was outside. The door must have been open all game. The lights also weren't on, and I didn't have my phone on me, so I couldn't use the flashlight or anything. I shut the back entrance door and began feeling around the walls like a blind person, looking for the light switch. Over the sound of my skin rubbing against the brick wall, I heard a locker click. The sound of one of the lockers closing. I confidently called out, "Who's there?" assuming it was one of my teammates. No reply. It was dark in there, but not the kind of dark where you can't see anything. I began a slow walk down past the aisles, scanning each one for anybody who could have made that sound. And all the while I heard footsteps in the room, so I knew I wasn't alone. I got to the last aisle and saw for a mere second at the opposite side of the aisle someone really big moving behind the lockers as if they were hiding. I felt my heart skip a beat and was officially freaked out, so I decided to just leave and wait for the game to end to get my stuff. I made my way to the main entrance and tried to pull the door open, but it was locked from the inside too. I found the light switch right next to the door though, and the return of light made me feel a little better. With the light on, I gained the confidence to just confront whoever was in the locker room. Again, I started doing laps around the locker aisles, but I didn't see anyone. However, I still heard the footsteps opposite me wherever I went. If I was in one aisle, I heard the footsteps exactly opposite me in the next aisle over. I continuously called out, "Who's there?" I never even got so much as a cough in response. I became almost out of breath walking and running around the aisles so much. I then looked at the lockers and realized that in between them were tiny holes in which you could see over to the next aisle. I had an idea. I could peek through one of those holes and see who was on the other side. And so I quietly got on my knees and put my eye up to one of the holes. At first, all I thought I saw on the other side was darkness, as if something were blocking it. But I quickly realized what it was. What I was looking at through that hole was an eye. I ran out that back door quicker than I'd ever run in any of my games. When I went up to my coach, who understandably looked annoyed at me, I told him there was someone in the locker room. At first he assumed it was just the janitor, but after I convinced him it wasn't, he looked at me with a look on his face that told me he believed me. After the next call, he told the refs to pause the game, that there might be an intruder in the locker room. Half of my team and the coach went in to investigate, but by that time whoever was in there was gone. I didn't feel stupid or anything, as everyone seemed to believe me. I mean, the room was freezing and the back door was still open, for crying out loud. What we did find out at the end of the game, however, was that 4 of my teammates were missing their clothes from their lockers. All of them from the freshman locker aisle. I think I figured out what kind of person I was in that locker room with, and I'm just happy I never caught him. My brother's a hockey player, but he's only 13 years old, so I have to drive him to his games and practices a lot. His team always plays in an outdoor rink, so it usually gets really cold out. A couple weeks ago, I took my brother to his game, and since I usually get bored when I stay at his games, I took my girlfriend Michelle to watch with me. My brother's team was down like 4-0 by the end of the first period, and we really weren't enjoying it anymore. So me and Michelle decided to go to a more private location, not for anything sexual, just to smoke this stuff.
Yo, everyone, I got a honey brown.
He brought this up. She's not a big smoker, but I'm usually able to convince her to light up with me. The park that this rink is in is very foresty. About half of it is nothing but dense forest. Locals call it the Burning Woods for obvious reasons. Me and Michelle found a good spot behind a few big trees, and a few moments later, after lighting the bowl, we heard footsteps approaching us. I put the lighter and pipe away quicker than I even had time to think about it. We heard a chuckle as 2 guys lower to mid-20s came into
That's a
light.
light spike.
One of them had a painfully cliched mohawk with a green stripe and black fuzzy hair beneath. The other, a big bald guy with a...
When you hit the like button, well, I'll unpause it. Alright.
The guy with the mohawk laughed and said, "It's cool, don't worry about it. You got enough for 2 more?" My first instinct was to say, "Piss off, I'm spending time with my girlfriend." But for some reason, the words that came out were, "Yeah, I think so." I'm a serious coward. I always think of appropriate things to say in my head, but I never gather the courage to actually say it. After I said yeah, he told me he was just kidding, but that he had some super dope Durban poison or something in his car if we were interested. I looked at Michelle, who shrugged her shoulders, but I knew deep down she didn't want to go with them, just like I didn't. I then went in the direction of the hockey game. Told them, "Nah, it's okay, we were
Let
just
me
finishing up anyway." The guy just nodded his head and said, "Oh."
Let me tell you something.
He stuck out his hand for a goodbye high-five/handshake.
That
I shook his
represents
hand.
that man.
I directed Michelle back in the direction of the hockey rink. We both agreed that those guys were weird. We stopped when we thought they were far away. It's not like there wasn't any point in not smoking just because of that encounter. I gave Michelle the pipe and lighter, and as she flicked it, I could swear I heard footsteps moving through the leaves again. I did a quick side glance about 2 o'clock, and I knew he was there. The guy with the green mohawk. He was standing behind a tree with his head just kind of peering out from it. I did that thing with my eyes, looking over
everyone,
in that direction,
I gotta go.
kind of hint at it to Michelle.
But I will take
I
your
didn't
bet
want to
on that
confront the guy,
space.
because at this point I knew something was wrong
You want
with
to see
these
who
guys.
can make more premieres?
And as I was already having
Let's
no
take a
part
bet
of
on